All right. Hello and welcome back to Stable Discussion. Today is kind of like an update video. What things have been going on, what new AI things are really kind of changing the landscape. I run Hint Services. We're a consultancy, and I advise companies and clients on how to leverage AI for different things. I've done workshops for designers, I've done trainings for developers, and I've built product features that actually like leverage AI in the actual core feature. So I'm always kind of working through different things. What I'd like to do today is just kind of get you caught up on where I've been, what I'm kind of working on, and what's new, honestly. And let's just talk through some things because a lot has really changed in the last month or so. I just want to kind of share where I've been. So for starters, the Stable Discussion website has gone through a couple sets of changes. We've got kind of a light and dark mode here. We got this nice animation thing going on in the background. But additionally, we've added our own chat here. You can chat with me virtually, effectively. This chat summarizes a lot of the documents and publications that I've produced on Stable Discussion. So we can ask, what is Stable Discussion? And if we ask that, it'll kind of go off and kind of think through the resources that it has available to it and bring back an answer. In this case, Stable Discussion is this publication. We do approachable insights about modern artificial intelligence. That seems accurate. Additionally, you can kind of see where details are being sourced from. And so we've got our kind of initial podcast episode. We've got an article about what is Stable Discussion that we published on our Substack. And so these are pretty great. If I wanted to ask about, what about RAG systems? How do we build them? You can give me some feedback on some of the articles I've written about RAG to give you some idea about, what are the kind of processes that you might want to go through when you're thinking about building a RAG system. And so I've got this debugging your RAG setup. I've got another one, Conversations with the Past, which is another blog post that I've done before. So it's just a great way to kind of look through all the Stable Discussion content, see if there's anything interesting to you. Also just a good way to kind of get my general take on things. I publish all of my YouTube videos and all the blog posts go into this one central store. And so you can find out a lot of great information this way. Now, building this has been like a ton of fun. I've really enjoyed putting this together. And the tool that's really helped me put this together the most is Claude Code. And Claude Code I'm using all the time in so many ways. So if I pull up Cursor now, and I've got the core code base for this chat application, I've got Claude Code running as a extension actually. And I've just found it really beneficial to have it actually running in conjunction with the IDE. For instance, if I wanted to say, hey, let's simplify the text on the landing page a bit, it's going to be able to leverage some of the things that it knows about the code base. So in this case, I have this Claude MD file that kind of gives it some context about the code base that is available. And then it'll also have access to some of the different MCP servers. I run Wallaby locally, which is running a suite of tests. And then additionally, I also have the console Ninja. If there's any kind of console errors or stuff like that, that'll filter in and you can just access those all in one single place. So I really love those. Any of the changes that Claude Code makes are all going to show up directly in your IDE, kind of side by side, which is really nice. I'm able to just kind of like read through all the different changes that it's going to try and make here. And I can kind of approve them over on the right side here. AI coding tools has fundamentally shifted because these tools are, especially for coding, significantly more capable of being able to run longer sequences of changes given the right context. And I think the right context is really key and very critically important because what you'll find is oftentimes with these sort of like Claude Code and these different systems is simple high-level changes are very easy for them to make. They can kind of go through, understand a large set of code and make kind of surface-level decisions, right? This is just changing text on the page, right? But if we were going to do something more compelling, right, more interesting with this, for instance, if we were going to change how messages transition between different pages, that's going to be a more involved change and is going to drive things a bit differently. So let's maybe even kick that off. Let's try something like that. I'm not sure how well this is going to work. Okay, so I've got my prompt here. What I'm saying is like, let's add a really cool transition. So when each message is typed in and I say something like hi, I want that to slide up into this space here from the bottom. I'm going to kind of take a screenshot here. We're even just going to draw on this thing. So it's supposed to go there and it's supposed to animate up. So we'll just kind of add that detail there. Another cool thing that you can do with Claude Code, if I copy that screenshot and I paste that screenshot in, then that image is going to get attached as a resource that the AI is going to be able to read. So here's an image We'll see how it goes. It's going to make a sequence of assumptions about what is possible in the code base. And it's going to try and come up with a plan based on the assumptions that it has. It's your job as a developer or somebody working with Claude Code to give it the right set of those assumptions. So you need to be kind of like thinking through, okay, I'm giving it this task of animation of these things. What sort of assumptions do I need to give it around that task? And that can be really hard to do. In order to give it some of the context, one of the things that I did in my original prompt was I said, oh, let's use context 7. Context 7 is something that I really like using. You can look up something like anime, and you can find kind of the latest documentation for that system. So the current anime.js documents, I guess, looks like they're processing recently. I requested them. It looked like I got them. Oh, yeah. So I've given it some context around what kind of libraries I want. Those sorts of things are really, really necessary for developing these sorts of like AI systems, because there's a million ways to go about building it. And so it's up to your discretion where it should go or how it should apply these different things. Now, like the other thing that will happen here is if this task gets too hard, sometimes the AI will get lazy. So Claude Code will kind of hit a wall at some point where I'm asking it to do a significant enough amount of stuff that at some point it just says, okay, I did it. I did enough. I'm just going to move on. It's really interesting when that happens. That happens sometimes with testing, where I'm trying to get it to test something that's kind of hard or challenging to test. Sometimes it's trying to solve like lint or build issues. Eventually it just kind of goes, well, I didn't add the code that's failing here, so I'm just going to say that this is fine. It makes these kind of arbitrary distinctions about how far or how much it's going to do. And that helps it stay within these bounds of like how many cycles or how many round trips it's going through. But it's incredibly unhelpful when you're really trying to work through a problem and you want it to push that extra step to kind of continue through. These systems just aren't, I guess, like designed yet in a way that they understand problem solving in a more human way. They still understand it in sort of like a trail of things that have happened, but they don't really have much foresight. They'll commit to a path and then second guess themselves and pull back. They'll push forward on a new change and then they'll kind of at the last minute pull it back as well. I think you're kind of like seeing it even here a little bit, where we'd already created this animation, but now it's trying to enhance it. It's kind of going through and saying, okay, well, maybe this could be a little bit better. Even this thing that I just wrote, I think actually maybe there's probably something more I can do here. And I haven't given it any context about what good looks like, but it's kind of already going in and thinking about these sorts of things. One thing that I've really loved about working in an IDE is Claude Code working in the IDE, it can see some of these diagnostic issues with the code that it's being produced. So it'll notice when your like lint rules fail on a file that it just created. It'll kind of get notified of these sorts of things. And so it'll immediately kind of iterate on that and kind of work through that challenge. That's incredibly helpful versus when you're running it completely outside of an IDE. Claude, now you kind of have to tell it like, hey, by the way, okay, when you're finished, let's go through this step, this step, this step, this step to just make this thing work. I've really been liking working with it. I highly recommend it to pretty much every developer. And there's some new features that I've really been enjoying too. Claude Code just added Subagents. So I've played with this a little bit, where I've had like one of these agents like just be my kind of like test agent, where it's able to kind of just like go off and try and make tests for me. The best thing about this is when you're running with Claude Code, you have so much context that builds up. And when you have a one-off task, these agents can kind of like parse off and go off and do that one task without having to bring the whole entire context of the conversation with them. Claude is able to kind of call that agent, give it just enough context to do the work, and then it'll go off and kind of work through that work as it needs to. I haven't found it to be particularly effective compared to just running with Claude directly, but I'm still kind of working through kind of experimenting with this. It just came out last week, so it's still fairly fresh. I like the idea of being able to kick off a sub agent and being able to give it additional specificity about how to perform certain types of tasks. Which is kind of similar to commands, which I also really like using. And then additionally, there's Claude Code's GitHub Actions. And GitHub Actions, I really love. I think GitHub Actions are probably one of my like favorite features that have been introduced recently. So let me show you what that kind of looks like. So I created this issue for BennyChat, and in this, I effectively said, hey, like, there's this challenge. I have GitHub and Obsidian GitHub, and when a user hits a troubleshooting error, the system doesn't really know the difference between the two. There are also some cases where the user's credentials have expired because they're using a private token. I'd like to give them a better like kind of message. And so I just told Claude, hey, go build this issue. And Claude went off and just inside of like, GitHub, it went off and started working through building this issue out. It went off and created its own branch, pushed all the changes up, and got a PR ready for me. And so then I could just come in here and click create PR. And now I've got this great PR that Claude made that it was able to kind of go through and just kind of think through. And you can do a ton of different tasks with this. Like this is a different repo where I'm doing this kind of GitHub integration. And I've just asked it for basically a code review. There's potential race condition, missing input validation, private key exposure, and logs potentially. Lots of kind of interesting critical issues for it to kind of go through. And I've just been able to kind of like, ask specifically against a change for what I'd like to see. I find that it's really cool that you can kick off these GitHub actions in Claude on your phone, on the go, kind of anywhere. It really enables like anything to happen from wherever you are. And so, of course, I integrated this into this capability into BennyChat, which is kind of the latest other kind of set of features that I've been up to. Inside of settings now, there's this kind of tools list here, and you can kind of access all the different tools that BennyChat has available to you. And in this list of tools, at the very bottom, there's a GitHub MCP. When you enable this, you'll notice that there's a GitHub behavior customization down here. I've actually like listed out all of the repositories that I want it to kind of know about. So now I can actually use BennyChat with the GitHub MCP to kick off Claude GitHub actions, which is awesome. So for instance, I had this create issue command that I really like using in Claude, and I wanted to make sure it was consistently applied across the board. And so I said, hey, I want to add this step here to the end of all of my different issues. So what it did was it created GitHub issues for all of these different repositories. And then inside of each of these issues, you'll notice I can just kick off a Claude task here. In this case, I had to kick it off separately, but now like BennyChat can kick off directly sets of changes into my repos, right? Here's another one, plan module for visually displaying remote jobs and benefits. And so this kicked off this task, and I said, I had this thing for Claude already, and now it's come up with this plan for how to kind of go through building this thing out, right? Which is just really cool. There's so many interesting possibilities that you can really get through this. So now I've got basically BennyChat working as my GitHub Actions Claude Code orchestrator. And that's really awesome. I'm super thrilled about it. Imagine a future where you really are able to just like manage multiple projects all at once, multiple repositories across the board, and you have this agent that can kind of assist you in kicking off known changes to each of those different spaces. It's able to iterate with you, work with you, think through what kind of features you want in each of these different repositories. So I found that a very compelling and interesting case. And so I've been building out a kind of prototype of how that all works together. And so if I go into this organization settings, I'm able to connect my different GitHub directly to it. I'm able to create workflows. And over time, we'll be expanding the ability to develop entire workflows that are focused on AI agents building out capabilities here. And so I'm really excited about the potential of being able to do this at like a larger scale. If the idea of working with agents is really compelling to you, love to leave a comment. Like let's chat about it. I'd love to go into this more because I think this is going to be definitely like the future of how we build with AI. I think that like while Claude Code is kind of going through some interesting phases where they're limiting how much access people have to their tool, there's some awesome other capabilities, other tools like the Gemini CLI that are like hot on their heels, kind of building out similar feature sets and similar capabilities. And so like, I don't think Claude Code's always going to be the only coding environment in town. I think there's going to be a lot of other players that are going to be able to do the same kinds of things. And so I think we're going to see more and more of this capability of kind of working with these tools. And right now, I think those tools are very limited and they're very kind of single user focused. So I'm excited to be building out an entire platform that is focused on people working together with these tools. I hope this gives you kind of a brief shotgun view of everything I've got going on recently. Loving Claude Code. It's super sick. If you want to talk more about Claude Code, let me know. I've done a couple of videos on it recently about like how it's been helping me with some of my different tasks and things. And I'm tentatively thinking about doing a course on how to leverage it for developers because I'm using it so frequently now that there's some kind of patterns and practices that I've really enjoyed using that I think could be beneficial. So if that's interesting, leave a comment. Additionally, building out this chat has been really cool. There's so many things I want to do with it and so many ways I want to extend on it, but I love the core capability that it has right now. It's so elegantly done that I'm really happy with sort of how it came out. And then additionally, Benny Chat has gone through huge overhauls. It's just been incredible how much this has changed since I last shut it off. We've got an entire folder system. When you kind of create your tasks and you kick off a daily task, this goes directly into your daily folder. And so now there's automatic organization happening, all kind of ready for you there. I additionally added some cool settings for the system prompt. So if you wanted to customize Benny Chat to your kind of liking, you can go in here and edit this. I have mine constantly joke about how incompetent I am. And so you'll kind of notice sometimes it'll kind of make fun of me. It's like, given your track record, I'm impressed you remember to ask. So we're going to go ahead and mark that task complete. You can see there's some nice new graphics and kind of visuals for how Benny Chat works. And then because I've got that custom prompt running, it kind of notifies me, hey, you've got that custom prompt that is kind of kicked off here. Additionally, we improved the assistant a bit. It'll go off and based on your current tasks kind of think through, what do you need to do for getting your PR photo, right? Which was the task that I had here. Then it'll go and kind of do some research for me. Benny Chat changing a lot, still working through it. Lots of awesome supporters hopping in and kind of working with Benny Chat. So that's been really awesome to see. And again, we're just still getting in publishing stuff. It's just a little slower recently just because there's been so many cool things to play with. I always want to bring perspective. I don't want to kind of just talk at you like I'm the expert on things. I'm just showing you off some cool stuff that I've been seeing. And sometimes I got to get my head wrapped around it fully before I'm kind of ready to show it off. But if this was interesting to you, I'd love it if you subscribe on YouTube. We're almost hitting 4K, which is crazy. We'd also love it if you kind of give us a subscription over on Stable Discussion on our Substack as well. That's blog.stablediscussion.com. We've got some awesome people following the work that we've been doing, and we've been releasing some more kind of paid content over there for just kind of extensions on articles. Nothing super required, but just additional kind of things to kind of check out. For instance, like the wedding website template that I used for this article, that template is actually available for anyone who's paid. So there's some cool things like that. Again, thanks so much for tuning in. We'll be back soon because there's just so many other interesting things to talk about. So thanks again. We'll catch you in the next one. So really quick, I did actually want to go back to where Claude Code got to with this change for this animation. We didn't actually check it out, so I just need to let Claude kind of finish running here. And I'm just going to go ahead and let it just run through this here. So let's take a look. Immediately errors out. Okay, so we're getting an error right away. Let's go ahead. I'm just going to say, hey, there was an error. Animator.set is undefined. Yeah, this import isn't working correctly here. Don't think that's the right path. Now this may be because this anime.js documentation was processing previously, because I think they did push out a new version here. Yeah, it keeps saying library not found. Again, this is actually one of the tricky things actually about trying to leverage some of these tools sometimes is everyone's leveraging them. So sometimes they go down. Let's try downgrading maybe, and we'll see if that works. If that works, then maybe this is saved. If not, then that's not great. So let's see if we can't install a previous version here. So we downgraded the package. That's a crazy animation. That is not what I expected at all. Huh. Uh-huh. It just kind of sits there and like jitters, which is fun. Well, that's odd. Well, that's odd. Yeah, there's some weirdness going on there in terms of like how it's positioning itself. I think it's using an old version of AnimeJS. When the new AnimeJS documentation finally processes through Context 7, we could use that. But again, like context is absolutely everything for these things being able to kind of work together to build interesting stuff. So maybe I'll put out a that change if we can ever get anime docs through this again. So we'll try that out in the future.